Ignoring every bit of common sense, a lone man in the Canadian Rockies threw his only rope to a trapped mother bear and her cubs on a shaky ledge, and what happened next was too wild to guess. Sam Carter wasn't like most folks. At 45, he lived in a tiny shack high up in the mountains, far from the busy trails near Banff. He used to be a forest guide, leading hikers through these rough lands with his younger brother, Tom, by his side. 3 years back, Tom died in a rock slide right here in the Rockies, and Sam couldn't shake the guilt. He'd been the one calling the shots that day. Now he stayed alone, wandering the cliffs with just a backpack and a heavy heart. On this warm spring afternoon, the ground rumbled, a landslide tearing through the peaks. Sam was checking an old trail when he heard a deep growl bounce off the rocks below. His breath caught. He knew trouble was close. Sam edged closer to the cliff, his boots crunching on loose stones, and peered down into the ravine. There, on a thin, wobbly ledge, a huge mother bear clung tight, her 2 tiny cubs pressed against her furry side. The landslide had boxed them in, steep rock above, a deep drop below. The cubs whimpered, their little paws slipping as bits of dirt fell into the dark. Sam's heart thumped hard. He'd seen bears before, guiding folks through these woods with Tom, but never like this, scared and stuck. Every rule he'd ever learned shouted at him to walk away. Bears were trouble, especially a mom protecting her babies. One slip, and she could rip him apart. But then he saw one cub stumble, its cry sharp and weak, and it hit him like a punch. Those sounds reminded him of Tom's last yell before the rocks took him. Sam couldn't just leave them to die. Sam stood there, the wind tugging at his jacket, his mind racing. He could turn back to his shack, safe and sound, and let nature do its thing. That's what Tom would have told him. Stay smart, stay alive. But the guilt from losing his brother gnawed at him like a hungry wolf. He'd failed Tom, hadn't seen the rocks coming that day, and now these cubs' scared eyes stared up at him, begging for a chance. Sam's hand slid to the rope on his shoulder, his climbing line, the only thing keeping him safe if this ridge gave out. It was crazy, plain stupid to help a bear. But he couldn't shake the feeling that saving them might quiet the ache in his chest, just for a moment. With a shaky breath, he dropped to his knees, tied the rope to a twisted tree stump, and let it fall toward the ledge. "Please work," he whispered, hoping he wasn't signing his own end. The rope swung down, dangling right above the mother bear's head, flapping in the breeze. Sam's stomach flipped as she lifted her big snout, sniffing at it. Her eyes, bright and sharp, locked onto his, and he froze. She could snap at him, climb up and charge, and he'd have nowhere to run on this narrow ridge. Down below, the cubs squeaked, one pawing at the rope like it was a toy. The mother growled low, a sound that rumbled through Sam's bones, and he held his breath. What was she thinking? Was she mad? Scared? Then, slow as a shadow, she grabbed the rope with her teeth. Her huge paws dug into the cliff, pulling her weight up, the cubs scrambling after her. The ledge shook, bits of rock tumbling into the dark, and Sam gripped the stump tight, praying it'd hold. This was it. Help or doom, and no turning back now. The rope creaked and stretched as the mother bear climbed, her claws scraping the rock like nails on a chalkboard. Sam's arms burned, holding the line steady, sweat dripping into his eyes. She was strong but heavy, way heavier than he'd guessed, and the tree stump groaned under the strain. The cubs clawed their way up behind her, little grunts mixing with the wind. One slipped, dangling by a paw, and Sam's heart stopped. Would she drop? But the mother twisted, nudging it back with her nose, fierce and gentle all at once. Closer now, her hot breath puffed up toward him, and Sam could see every scar on her fur, every glint in her stare. She was just feet away, and he had no weapon, no plan if she lunged. The ridge felt smaller than ever. Then, with one last heave, her paws hit the top, kicking dirt in his face. She was here, and Sam was out of moves. The mother bear stood there, huge and huffing, her cubs tumbling onto the ridge beside her. Sam stumbled back, his boots slipping on loose gravel, his heart pounding like a drum. She was so close, close enough to smell her wet fur, close enough to see the steam rising off her coat. Her eyes didn't leave his, and he couldn't tell if she was angry or just tired. The cubs shook themselves, whining soft and high, and huddled behind her legs. Sam's rope dangled useless now, still tied to the stump, his only lifeline tangled in the dirt. He'd broken every rule to get her up here, and now what? One swipe of her paw could end him, and out here no one would ever know. His brother's voice echoed in his head. "Don't be dumb, Sam." But it was too late for that. He held his hands up, slow, palms out, like that'd stop a grizzly. She didn't charge. The mother bear just stood there, swaying a little, her big chest heaving from the climb. Sam's knees felt weak, but he didn't dare move, not yet. The cubs peeked out, their round ears twitching, and one took a wobbly step toward him. The mother growled, low and sharp, and it froze, scampering back to her. Sam swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. She wasn't attacking, but she wasn't leaving either. The ridge was narrow, barely room for all of them, and the ravine yawned on one side, the forest thick on the other. He'd saved them, sure, but now they were stuck together, and he didn't know what she'd do next. Her stare softened, just a flicker, and Sam wondered, did she get it? Did she know he'd helped, or was she just waiting for him to slip up? Minutes crawled by, the sun dipping lower, painting the cliffs red and gold. The mother bear finally moved, slow and heavy, nudging her cubs toward the trees. Sam let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, his hands shaking as he watched. She didn't look back, just lumbered into the brush, her cubs tripping over roots behind her. The sound of snapping twigs faded, and then nothing. Sam sank to the ground, his back against the stump, the rope coiled beside him like a snake. He'd done it. They were safe, and he wasn't dead. Not yet. But his chest still ached, not just from fear. Something else stirred there, a mix of relief and wonder. He'd faced a bear and walked away, but he couldn't shake the feeling those eyes would haunt him. And he was right. Sam picked himself up, dusting off his jeans, the ridge quiet now, except for the wind whistling through the rocks. He grabbed his rope, coiling it back over his shoulder, and started the long trek to his shack. His legs felt like jelly, and his mind spun with what he'd just done. He'd spent years guiding folks through these mountains with Tom, teaching them to steer clear of bears, to stay safe. Now he'd thrown all that out the window for a grizzly and her cubs. Part of him felt proud, like he'd honored Tom's memory by saving something alive. But another part, the part that remembered his brother's last shout, felt foolish. What if she'd turned on him? What if he'd died up there, alone? By the time he reached his shack, the sky was dark, and he collapsed on his cot, the cubs' cries still ringing in his ears. Days turned into a week, and the Rockies settled back into their rough, wild rhythm. Sam kept busy fixing a leaky roof on his shack, checking trails he hadn't walked since Tom was around. The landslide had left scars, broken trees, new gaps in the cliffs, but life went on. He tried not to think about the bear, but she crept into his dreams, those fierce eyes, that slow climb, the way she'd stared like she knew him. He told himself it was over, a one-time thing. Bears didn't care about people, they moved on. Still he found himself glancing at the forest more, listening harder to the rustles in the brush. Something felt different, like the mountains were watching him back. He shook it off, but deep down he wasn't so sure she was gone for good. One morning, Sam headed out early, his boots crunching on a thin layer of frost. He'd planned to cross a rickety ridge to check an old lookout spot he and Tom used to love. The air was sharp, the cliffs glowing pink in the dawn light. He felt good for once, lighter, like maybe he was finally climbing out of the hole Tom's death had left. But as he stepped onto the ridge, the ground shifted, just a little at first, then a jolt. A crack split the rock beneath him, a hidden crevasse opening wide. He lunged for a handhold, but his fingers slipped and he was falling, fast. The world blurred, sky, stone, darkness, and his yell bounced off the cliffs. He thought of Tom, of the rope, of those cubs. Then something hit him hard, not rock, but fur, and he wasn't falling anymore. Sam hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out of him, but he wasn't in the crevasse, he was back on the ridge. A huge shadow loomed over him, warm and heavy, and he felt teeth snag his jacket, tugging him away from the edge. It was her, the mother bear. Her massive paws gripped the rock, her fur brushing his face as she yanked him to safety. Her cubs stood back, wide-eyed in the trees, watching like they knew what was at stake. Sam's heart raced, his mind a jumble. He'd been inches from death, and now this? She let go, stepping back with a huff, her breath clouding in the cold morning air. Those same amber eyes met his again, steady and deep, and Sam couldn't move, couldn't speak. She'd saved him, just like he'd saved her. He scrambled to his knees, hands shaking, staring at the bear like she was a ghost. The crevasse gaped behind him, a black scar in the rock, and he could still feel the drop pulling at him. She didn't growl, didn't charge, just stood there, her cubs inching closer now, their little noses sniffing the air. Sam's chest burned, not from fear this time, but something bigger. Gratitude, maybe, or awe. He'd tossed that rope a week ago, thinking it was a one-way deal, a crazy risk for a stranger's cubs. But she'd remembered. She'd tracked him, waited, and when he needed her, she was there. His brother's voice flickered in his head. Nature's wild, Sam, but it's fair. And for the first time in years, he believed it. This wasn't luck. This was something real. The mother bear snorted, a low rumble, and turned away, her cubs hopping after her. Sam watched, still on his knees, as they moved toward the forest. The sun climbed higher, spilling light over the cliffs, and he saw how strong they looked now, fatter, livelier, like they'd found their footing since that shaky ledge. She stopped at the tree line, just for a second, and glanced back at him. No words, no sound, just a look that hit him like a fist. Then she was gone, her cubs vanishing into the green, leaving only the echo of their steps. Sam touched his torn jacket, the fabric ripped where her teeth had grabbed him, and let out a shaky laugh. He was alive because of her, and that truth settled into him, heavy and warm, like a fire he hadn't known he needed. Sam sat there a long time, the ridge silent now except for the wind rustling the pines. His hands still shook as he brushed dirt off his jeans, the torn jacket hanging loose on his shoulders. He couldn't stop seeing her eyes, those fierce, knowing eyes that had pulled him back from the dark. He thought of Tom, how they'd laughed over campfires, mapping trails and dodging bears like it was a game. Tom would have called him nuts for that rope stunt, but maybe he'd have grinned too, proud of the guts it took. Sam's throat tightened, tears stinging his eyes for the first time in years. He'd lost his brother to these mountains, but today they'd given him something back, a debt paid in fur and claws. It didn't erase the pain, but it made it lighter, like a load he could carry now. He stood slow, legs wobbly, and looked out over the Rockies, The cliffs stretched endless, sharp and wild, hiding 1,000 dangers he'd faced with Tom. And now, alone. That crevasse stared back at him, a jagged reminder of how close he'd come. Sam wondered where the bear was now, if she'd felt the same fear he had on that ledge, the same need to save what mattered. He'd never know, not really, but he pictured her out there, leading her cubs through the trees, tough and free. The rope was still in his pack, frayed from her climb, and he decided to keep it, not for climbing, but for remembering. A piece of proof that sometimes the wild didn't just take, it gave too, in ways he'd never dreamed. By the time Sam got back to his shack, the sun was high, warming the rocks around him. He dropped his pack by the door and sat on the step, staring at the forest where she'd gone. Life out here was hard, always had been. Tom used to say, it built you up or broke you down. Sam had been broken for a while, but today felt different. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was part of something bigger, tied to a mother bear and her cubs by a rope and a rescue. He smiled, small and real, and whispered to the wind, "Thanks, girl." The mountains didn't answer, but they didn't need to. Sam knew he'd see her in every shadow, every growl, and that was enough to keep going. A month later, Sam was fixing a trail marker near his shack when he heard a rustle, too big for a squirrel. He turned, and there she was, the mother bear, stepping out of the trees, her cubs bigger now, trailing behind. His heart jumped, but she didn't growl, just dropped something at her feet. It was Tom's old knife, lost in that rock slide years ago, its handle scratched but shining. Sam's breath caught. She'd found it, carried it back, like she knew what it meant. He stepped forward, slow, and picked it up, the cold metal heavy in his hand. She watched him, then turned, leading her cubs away for good. Sam clutched the knife, tears falling free, a smile breaking through. The Rockies had taken his brother, but through her, they'd given him a piece back, a wild, perfect goodbye. If you found this story moving and inspiring, please like and subscribe. Your support helps spread the message of hope, transformation, and the wild beauty of our world. Thank you for listening, and may you always carry hope in your heart.